re-entering climate accords. There
Oh,
were some
yes.
big companies, talking about the environment. The U.S., for example, is re-entering the Paris Climate Accord. Some of the goals, I would say, are unrealistic. And, I'm an Albertan kind of kid, grew up with pump jacks all around our farms and ranches. So I wouldn't say I'm pro fossil fuel, but, there's a place for it, certainly in today's economy. But there's better ways to manage it. And there's always better ways to do it and make it better, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that we're seeing that a bonus is that because of the cost of COVID, because of the way it's changed our economy, this changed our behavior, that there's more interest in the environment and making it better for us around us.
I don't know how much the technology has improved, but if you think of Elon Musk and SpaceX, right?
Oh, that's on our list.
Okay.
You're jumping on me ahead again.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
But if you relate that to oil, I don't know how they extract, if the oil extraction process is much different than it was in like 1926, right? They have the hydraulic things that tighten the drill stem, whereas before they had the chains that you had to spin them and had to have chains whipping all over, right? So it's safer, but I don't think the technology has really changed much, right?
No, it hasn't that much. And I like I said, I grew up in Central Alberta, and I know that actually some of the people I grew up with, their families were some of the first families that developed fracking.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, they weren't the originators of fracking, but certainly some of the processes that have become in use worldwide. And, there's been a lot of negative things about fracking. And from what I know about it, it doesn't sound like something that I'd really like done underneath my land or anywhere near the water I drink or those things. But the point is that all of those companies now are looking at new ways of doing things and getting around because we're looking at, we've entered time. China just announced they're not going to be exporting coal. As you said, people are going to be commuting less. I know that a lot of people are saying, and this is something that's coming up in Lethbridge, is mass transit. How do we make, because we started looking at mass transit, right, with the pandemic, how do we make it safe? How do we make it more viable? How do we make it a better experience for people, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that whole issue on being more aware of our environment and the climate is something that has come out on the side of hopeful because of what we've undergone recently.
Well, wasn't it like early on, like I'm talking 6 months in or something, like where, communities in China that hadn't seen the sky for, 10 decades, or not 10 decades, but for a decade,
a long time.
All of a sudden they see blue sky, like, it's just, and in like Venice, where the pollution in the waterways was horrendous, and like it's clearing up, right? That kind of thing, or it did, or yeah.
Well, airplanes, cruise ships, daily commuting, all of those things have definitely impacted the carbon dump, daily carbon dump, hourly carbon dump that we see going on. And I don't think that anyone argues that that's good. There's arguments about how serious that is or about how dangerous it is. But I haven't met anyone that's saying, "Oh, it's great for the environment to dump all of that carbon dioxide in there." So, I think that
for people who are really, there's people, of course, who are very sensitive to it, and it is a neurotoxin, right? Exhaust fumes are a neurotoxin. It gets even in the grass on the ditches, right? Collects it from the vehicles, and then if you're very sensitive to it, you can get very sick just walking through the ditch, right? If in fact
absolutely.
that's so.
Well, in Japan, our building, one of our school buildings were white, and we used to, have to go out there and scrub off the carbon. And when we first went there, we just went out with a brush and scrubbed it off, right? Because it would get this black film on it. But always felt sick afterwards. It wouldn't get into your lungs, but you'd get in contact with it. And of course, you wore rubber gloves. And then we found out that the normal way is you have to hire these guys who come out in hazmat suits and big pressure washers, and they hang up sheets so that it's contained. And it's pretty toxic stuff, right?
So let's talk about young Scott and gasoline and such like this. Did you ever siphon gasoline out of a tank and get a big mouthful of gas?
Yeah, of course I did.
Of
Yeah.
course I did. I did too. Yes. So I don't know what that did to our brains, but probably wasn't good. I
Yeah.
doubt, but
Well, and I've never really met a farm kid who doesn't like the smell of diesel, like
yeah.
a diesel tractor or something. I
Yeah.
don't know why. If you're a city kid, you probably have never smelled diesel smoke on a clear morning, but there's something about it just smells good.
It's not as nice as gunpowder fire.
No, it's not, but
Not
it's
as nice
pretty
as that,
good.
but it's quite nice. Yes. Very
Not good
pleasant.
for the environment, though. Yeah.
No.
But I do remember, this is funny. Like I said, I grew up in Central Alberta. Is that at night the sound of pump jacks would put me to sleep. That
Oh yeah, nice.
because I think around our ranch, I don't know, we must have had 20 or 30 of the things, and in the winter you can hear them quite clearly, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so it was almost
the sound travels so good on in the cold or something, I guess.
Yeah, and it was sort of, and I'm sure there's environmentalists that are just freaking out, but it was almost like a symphony of as these pump jacks would do their thing. But
nice.
yeah. So anyway,
those sound effects are all included with this show. No extra charge, folks.
And you can reuse them. I give freely my public comments. Help yourself to
Nice.
Scott's pump jack noises.
Exactly. That's right. No patent on that, baby. You go ahead and use it.
None at all. So yeah, whatever your take on it is, I think that there's definitely hope for a greener existence coming out of what we've been through, right?
Right. Yeah.
This is one on the list, and this has very little to do with the pandemic, sort of, but it has a lot to do with a lot of the social unrest and things that were going on, which is the pandemic sort of overtook that really, really quickly, right? And that's talking about how cities are looking at policing. And, there's that whole defund the police thing, which personally I think is crazy, but I think that there's an underlying message there that people wanted to change, and change has occurred. And a lot of big cities have been not talking about defunding the police per se, but really looking at how they go about protecting their communities and providing what their communities need. And in California, Albuquerque, New Mexico, San Francisco are all looking at ways that they can better utilize their first responders and their emergency teams. So when there's a drug overdose, when there's those type of emergencies, in the past, they would roll men with guns. The first people on scene were the police. And, I've talked to lots of police officers. They're not equipped to deal with that. If somebody's laying there overdosing, they've got Narcan with them usually, but beyond that, that's not really their bailiwick, right? So then the EMTs have to roll behind them, and the police have to clear it, and then the EMTs go in, and the opportunities for problems or mistakes are really, really high. And you look at law enforcement and their interaction with people that are suffering from drug addiction or drug overdose or mental health issues is very confrontational. Usually the police only get involved when there's a danger, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're a police officer or law enforcement agent and you're rolling up on the scene, your historical memory, your body, everything is getting ready for a confrontation, right? Because that's the normal situation that you're going to face. Sure. And you want to go home to your kids and your wife, and sure, you want to help out, and I believe that, law enforcement are some of the finest people we have, but they're human. They suffer from stress and all of the issues.
They're doing incredibly hard work, The things they have to see, right? The stories they have to hear, that's like brutally hard stuff that they have to do. So, yeah. So very grateful that there's people men and women who put themselves in harm's way to do that work.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example, and this is the point. I had a cousin who was undercover narcotics squad in Vancouver, and we were out riding horses one day, and he was telling me, he said, and he quit quite young. He left the force and retired very early, and after I think like 12 or 14 years on narco undercover. And he said the hardest thing is that every time they would get to roll, they'd be all stacked up outside the door. And when that door opened, they never knew what was going to be on the inside. Was it going to be a shotgun? Was it going to be dead kids? Was it going to be, they never ever knew. And so that moment for them was like a moment of extreme fear, horror, preparation. You know, can I get to my gun before, you know, they kill me or one of my partners, or, you know, all of the things that go through your head. It's really quite horrific. You know, most of us open doors and never even think of what's on the other side. Nope. And, you know, these people continually are in that position. But then you look at EMTs, and I've had good friends that become EMTs, and, you know, when they roll to a call like that, they start going through a mental checklist. Okay, you know, are they breathing? You know, what have they taken? Do they have a history of abuse? Is their body used to this? Is this something that, you know, there's a whole different mindset that's going on because they're used to dealing with a whole different situation. Now, I understand that sometimes, you know, obviously police protection is required and is needed. But what these cities are finding when they look back at their cases and do their reviews is that in many cases, an EMT, after everyone's taken care of, is a better way to go. So these cities are saying, instead of automatically rolling law enforcement, let's leave them for, you know, the things that absolutely for sure we know we need them for, right? And we'll roll EMTs or specially trained, you know, that are some of the cities are looking at sort of an in-between EMT law enforcement officer. They're really looking at new ways to deal with policing. And I think that's a really hopeful thing.
Well, the other thing that makes me think of too, Scott, is, you know, let's say there's little people in that house, right?
Yeah.
And you've got an EMT or people who aren't like big guys with guns kind of a thing coming in a more gentle way to kind of help in the situation, right? That's got to be less traumatic for that little person, right?
Well, and that's not to say that there's not very compassionate or small or whatever police at all. And I know that's not what you're saying.
No.
But, you know, I really think of, you know, I got pulled over once in a back road when I was in college in West Virginia. We'd gone across the state line into Ohio, bought some beers at the gas station. This is on my list of stupid things to do. They asked me to drive because I'd only had one beer. And so I said, okay, I was driving some back road, got pulled over. Police stopped us. Being a kid from Alberta, I knew all the police there. So automatically I jumped out of the car and started to walk back to the police cruiser. Which was met with me getting bounced off the back of the car and the gravel and me in my back, gun to the back of my head. And once we all calmed down and went back to the station and talked it over, and luckily I had a letter from my mother in my pocket. So they understood that I wasn't from there. And I explained my situation, and they said, you know, you're really lucky because here, you know, when somebody does that, it's 100% a sign of aggression. And, you know, we're on that road, the trooper that pulled you over, you know, there was multiple people in the car. The driver jumped out and started, you know, coming back towards our vehicle. We don't know if you're armed. We don't know what's happening. You know, the officer in that situation would have been justified to take more aggressive action than he did. You know, you're really lucky that you didn't get shot. And it really drew home to me that, you know, of course, after I got home and thought about it and, you know, was scared that, boy, that would have been really unfair to that officer. You know, he pulls over a car with 5 people in it, you know, on a back road. It's really dark. One person does something really erratic. He's by himself. You know, the other people in the car fidgeting around, acting really strange, probably just trying to hide beer bottles under the seats. But you know, to the officer in the cruiser behind, all of that equals, you know, am I going to get to go home and see my kids tonight? And so I think that mentality, that reality, let's call it a reality, right? The reality that they face may not put them in a situation, and it's resources, right? People talk about resources, and often I think that law enforcement are put into situations that they may not be the best people for. Yes, they'll come up with a solution because they're trained to find solutions, but they may not be the best people. And I think cities are looking at, according to the research that I found, there's a lot of big cities looking at, not saying, oh, our police are bad, but they're saying maybe our system isn't optimized. Maybe it's an old way of thinking, and maybe we have other professionals that could be responding to these types of situations. Domestics, for example, there's different levels of domestics. And some cities, any sort of domestic issue, law enforcement's rolled. And, in some cases that's absolutely warranted and that's what's needed. But they're looking at and saying, is that warranted in all cases?
I know that certainly in some parts of the country, some parts of the world, let's put it that way, law enforcement is increases fear, doesn't increase feelings of safety, right? And like I think here, our law enforcement officers increase our feeling of safety in our community, right? And I believe that to be the case. But the more they can do that, increase feelings of safety in our community, the better off we all are, right? That's the reality of it.
Well, and it has to be said, and I know that you brought this up in other episodes, we're a couple of middle-aged, middle-income white guys, right? So our experience with things is pretty one-sided. I know that when I was in the southern US, the experience of Caucasians was very different than the experience of African Americans generally. So there's a lot of issues here, but the hope point, see what I did there? Nice. The hope that I hope everyone will take away from this message of hope is that cities and organizations are looking at the best way and not just saying we've always done it this way, we're going to keep doing it this way. And it's not about judging the police and saying you're bad, so we're going to replace you. They're saying, are we putting you in situations that there's really no win-win for you? And I think that that's really, really positive. And then they're looking at, sorry.
Oh, I'm just going to add in, and then also, as you identified, with your experience in the southern states, and your experience quite different than any Black colleagues that you might have had there.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
That like zero, like this should be like a worldwide law enforcement rule, zero racism, right? Like this is, these are the citizens that you are protecting, right? So like, if you think about, I was chatting with an Indigenous woman here in town, and she was talking about her 15-year-old daughter, and she wouldn't let her daughter go to the mall for fear of being, abducted, human trafficking, that kind of thing. I understand, like I don't understand it. Like I wouldn't have any concerns about my daughter, but I understand, well, that shouldn't be the case, right? Her safety level in the community should be the same as mine, right? And that the system is gonna look out for her daughter as well as it's looking out for my daughter, right?
Yeah, agreed. And I think that they do. I think in general that they do. And I think that really what's coming out of this is just reevaluating and looking at openly who are the best people to solve the problem in the best possible way. And or is there alternate training that we genuinely need to help these people do their job? Oh, I lost you.
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry, man. My screen went blank for a second.
Oh, okay.
I think that that's a good whole point. Let's move on from that because we've got a few other good ones. This one you'll really like. I don't know what time we have. I didn't start a timer, but telehealth is now becoming mainstream.
Yes. Good news. Good news. Yeah.
You probably can talk to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as you know, Scott, my day job is about solutions to help employers keep them and their teams healthy is my day job. And I think that any access that makes it, or any type of a service that makes it easier to access for the people that need that care, more convenient for them, more reliable for them, I think that's awesome, right? So that's great news. So if we can do that, I'm a big fan of it. I've used it. I thought it worked really well. And you talk to it depending on the service. Sometimes you're talking to a doctor. Sometimes you're talking to an LPN, so basically I think it's awesome to increase access to service, right? Same as, Scott, you probably know this, there's this integrated care access model in Lethbridge that are teaching Lethbridgians about the system navigator training, right? So that people in our community have a better understanding of how you access resources in our community, so that we see somebody who has a need and we say, hey, I think I know a resource that might help you. If you wish, I can try and connect you with this resource, right? That kind of a thing. So I think it's anything to take the barriers off people getting the help they need is a good thing.
Yeah, my pituitary gland problem was damaged when I had glaucoma.
Yeah.
I have two doctors, endocrinologists, and the other one is some kind of neurologist, ladies in Edmonton. They met me when I was unconscious in the hospital in Edmonton. I've never met them. I've talked to them over the phone a number of times. We've telehealth linked regularly. They have solved my problem. They're still working on other stuff. Never met them, right?
Awesome. That's amazing.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So, and that's becoming the norm. And I think that's an exceptional thing,
Yes.
right?
Great news.
And I talked to a doctor friend. He said the same thing because, you know, they only want to see people they need to see. Their schedules are overbooked. They're really overbooked.
And they, you know, being the medical professionals, they don't have the exposure of somebody who has a virus or a cold, or right. They can protect themselves from that exposure, keep themselves safe. So it's a win-win all the way around.
Exactly. So how much time do we have for one more or two more?
Two more. Sorry, I just got to adjust my little mat here. I must have been moving around too much.
Well, hey. I'm gonna throw you a bone here, and I'm gonna talk about the space economy because this is a big one. Space economy is blasting off, right?
Oh, look at you go, Scott Sweetman.
They're saying everything's pointing to 2021 of being a banner super year for global space economy. You want to talk about that, your hero?
Sure. Well, I don't follow anything much more that Elon Musk does. I just know that he transformed an industry. He's transformed space travel by making reusable rockets. Why did it take people 50 years to figure that out? Was it 50 years? Yes, it was 50 years. Like that's amazing. And that he made such a significant difference there. It's incredible, I think. So, yeah.
Well, and Elon Musk is also building a system of satellites that's going to allow interconnectivity around the globe. So basically, everyone everywhere is going to be able to connect, and that's fantastic, right?
It is.
But it's not just the private sector. NASA is going to be landing a helicopter on Mars, I think, this year. I'm not a space junkie, but I do have it tagged on my Google announcement, so I get quite a bit.
A helicopter.
Yeah.
A helicopter. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know the details, but this is something to go look up. So because I don't understand in low air environments or no air environments how things like that work, but apparently NASA's working on a helicopter for Mars. Boeing is looking at the design stations of a Starliner aircraft. Okay. So we're getting to the point that not just trillionaires can take a little holiday in space. You know, we might be a generation or two away, but we've broken that barrier. We've broken that glass ceiling, as it will. And I'm not taking away from other glass ceilings that still remain unbroken. But it's pretty clear that this one has been broken, and we've got a lot of hope heading into it. No, we don't quite have jet cars in every home like they used to think we would have by 2021, but we're getting closer. We're getting closer. So, so if you're a space junkie, that is the place to go.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
I'm saving the last one for you, and I'm a rancher's son, so this is I maybe have a little different view than you about this, but
okay. Well, wait a minute. What is it you're reading from first of all? What is this list? Where's this from?
My notes.
Your
notes. It's from all over.
All over. Okay, let's hear it. I don't know about this setup. What are you telling me here, buddy? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. North America is going meatless.
Yes. Oh yeah, it's happening, baby.
Yeah,
it's not. I don't know what the world population that is vegan or vegetarian is, but it's going up for sure, no question. And it's something like I think people should consider trying, at least just try it and see if it has, like, there's a lot of reasons why you might try it. One is for your health. Mm-hmm. And in my case, you know this, Scott, I've told this many times. I watched that show Forks Over Knives, and then was so amazed at the research and the linkage between animal protein and disease, and a variety of different diseases, and how with mice turn cancer on and turn it off. Turn it on, turn it off, just by varying the protein, the animal protein in the diet. So that was incredible. And then, but I thought, ooh, a vegan looks like somebody who's like, 80 pounds, and he's gonna, he's very frail, and I like, this didn't make sense. I didn't want to be this. And then there's this guy, Rip Esselstyn, and that's Esselstyn, the guy who's the researcher did the China study. Rip Esselstyn, his son, is like 6'4", 250-pound, like marathoner, firefighter, very, very physically strong. And then he had a way to say, hey, you want to try doing a vegan thing? Here's my 30-day trial, right? And I tried it for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, I felt considerably better.
Did you get big guns, Al? Did you get...
But things like inflammation are very much tied to animal protein consumption. So, and what is inflammation impact? Arthritis, problems in general, right? Arthritis, Alzheimer's disease, like heart conditions that are all impacted by inflammation, right? And so dial back the meat or the animal protein, and that. So that's a health reason, right? Yeah. Environmental reason, then it's like huge. Like there's for every, I'm gonna butcher these numbers, but it's gonna be close. For every pound of meat that you produce, to process it takes like 150 gallons of water, or something like that. So a huge draw on water as a resource. And it takes like 10 pounds of grain, of food supply, a plant food supply, to produce 1 pound of a meat food supply. So if you're thinking about feeding everybody in the world, well, all of a sudden you can multiply your food supply by 10, right? Like now you got 10 pounds of barley, grain, whatever it is that humans can thrive on, and instead of 1 pound of meat. So it's huge that way. And then I know that you have a passion for animals, Scott. You love your dog. You love your dog.
I love cows too. Yeah.
You love cows too.
Yeah.
You would never. So, that if you're worried about the suffering of other sentient beings, then you don't, in my case, nothing has to die for me to live. So that kind of has a feel good type value to it. So
absolutely.
And now, you know what? And I think there's huge profits to be made. A&W has this Beyond Meat burger, right? So it's a plant-based protein burger. And Southern Alberta is going to be a huge corridor for plant protein production, right? Huge, like with beans and lentils and that kind of stuff here. Anyways, Beyond Meat burger, you can buy the Mama burger, big old slab of meat for $2.50. You buy the Beyond Meat burger, it's $7.80 for like. So A&W is going cha-ching, and I'm the guy who's paying it. So like I can't bitch. I pay it.